All right, this is the Fantasy Sports Boss with another fantasy football player wrap-up. Dameon Pierce, the Houston Texans, turned out to be a real find. A fourth-round rookie coming out of the University of Florida. Started talking about Dameon Pierce. Midway this past summer. Towards the end of July, when it became apparent, it became obvious that Pierce was really the only decent running back on the roster. I mean, Rex Burkhead was there. But we all knew that Burkhead, not only is he just an injury waiting to happen, but he's just a limited player, athletically, can catch the football, not really an effective runner. So it was a perfect storm of a mid-round pick, fourth-round pick for Dameon Pierce, ending up in the perfect location on a rebuilding Texans team that needed help at running back. And after the first week one, where Pierce was kind of just eased into the action and Burkhead was the primary ball carrier, from that point on, Pierce was the guy. So for the totality of the season, now, of course, he suffered an ankle injury that ended his season early, but through 13 games, Pierce was quite good. 939 rushing yards, 4.3 a carry on a very bad Texans team, 4 touchdowns on the ground, added 30 catches for 165 yards and another score. A couple of things here about Pierce that need to be said. One, very, very underrated speed, excellent at breaking tackles, does not go down on first contact. He is a tough runner, classic tackle breaking runner, just very tough, and he has underrated speed. The other aspect of Pierce is that he is an underrated receiver. The Texans really didn't utilize him as much in the passing game, and that hurt his weekly point total in fantasy football. In terms of his performance in fantasy football, so it was very first half heavy. So obviously we talked about week 1, he really didn't do much of anything, only 4 fantasy points. But starting in week 2, started to get more work, 8 fantasy points in week 2. Then he really took off in week 3, scored a touchdown, 18 fantasy points, scored again week 4, 25 fantasy points, 131 yards rushing. Really great outing there against the Chargers. Week 5 against Jacksonville, scored again, 3rd game in a row, 99 yards on the ground, 20 fantasy points. Had a 139-yard game against the Philadelphia Eagles. But really from that point onward, only had 1 more rushing touchdown. And the issue too with Pierce is that as the season went on, and I spoke about this multiple times, he wore down. So he was only a part-time player at Florida. And again, during this course of the season, I kept mentioning, sell high on Pierce. I thought it was a good idea to sell high because I thought he was going to deal with fatigue. Being only a part-time player at Florida, now in the NFL, bigger hitters, longer season, was going to wear him down. And really, when he got to week 10 is when he had surpassed his touch total in Florida, his previous high at Florida in terms of touch total. And the problems began in week 10. Only 12 fantasy points. Week 11, 3 fantasy points. Week 12, 4 fantasy points, had somewhat of a mini rebound week 13 with 12 fantasy points, but that was still not great. And then week 14, 11 fantasy points before he went out injured. So Pierce really wasn't a help. He was more like a flex play the rest of the season. And that really kind of dogged him, undermined his owners. And, of course, they did lose him for the fantasy football playoffs. Like I said, though, getting back to the numbers, 939 rushing yards, on a very, piss poor Texans team, nothing to be ashamed of. 4.3 per carry, not a great average on paper, but again, the blocking was horrendous. There was nothing to respect in the passing game. Opposing defenses stacked the box, so Pierce really had no room to run. 4 touchdowns on the ground, 30 catches, 165 yards, and another score through the air. If he had even competent quarterback play, there would have been more receiving numbers as well. So looking ahead now to next season, Texans clearly still in a very long rebuild. So they are going to draft a quarterback. If they get C.J. Stroud, I think right off the bat, that will help Pierce tremendously. Stroud has an excellent arm. I've spoken many times about how I love C.J. Stroud. I think he's going to be right there as the best player in the upcoming 2023 draft. I think he's got future Pro Bowl written on him. And he threw 2 running backs while he was in school at Ohio State. So I think that will benefit Pierce as well. Having not a full season, but 13 weeks of an NFL season under his belt will allow Pierce to have more, energy throughout the course of the season. Next year, he'll build up more stamina, more strength in his legs to handle the rigors of a full season. And, he will just get better. I know the Texans are going to draft some blockers to help out C.J. Stroud or whatever quarterback they end up getting. And that's only going to help Pierce going forward. And even better, there's no competition there. There's really, Daria Gunway, however you pronounce that last name. I'm sorry, I can't even pronounce it. Rex Burkhead, if they bring him back again on a one-year deal, big deal. So it's going to be Pierce's show for sure. And he's going to be one of those few running backs in fantasy football next season that will be the bell cow back. So running back 2, absolutely in standard. Running back 2 in PPR, absolutely, no doubt about it. Can he grow to a running back 1? I don't think so, just because of the ineptitude that still will surround him next season. Even if they get Stroud, the Alabama quarterback, anybody, it's still going to be a long process there. He's still going to have to deal with stack boxes. It's going to be tough for him to score a lot of touchdowns. But strong running back 2, absolutely. In terms of the ADP, I can see Pierce going early 3rd round. I think just the fantasy community is going to be a little leery that he's playing on the Texans, another just a bad team, and it's going to be another bad season for the team. So that might allow him to slip into the middle of the 3rd round, maybe even the late 3rd round, where I think he would be a really good value there. If he's your top running back, I can live with it. If you choose to stack up on wide receivers like I always do to start the draft, I think that you can work with Pierce as your top running back. But you want to maybe get a little bit more a dynamic player to be your top running back there. So, but again, rock solid player. Impressive rookie season. The numbers were better than they looked on paper just because of the team dynamic he had to face week in and week out. So next season, strong running back 2 all the way. All right, this is the Fantasy Sports Bus. Hit that subscribe, hit that notification button. More wrap-up videos on the way, NFL draft videos on the way, free agency videos on the way, all that good stuff. So make sure you hit that subscribe button.